Insane cannibalistic serial killer who murdered his own family. Abattoir origins explored. You know, there's a reason Batman is called the world's greatest detective and why he's one of the most popular comic book characters of all time. You might be thinking we're talking about his obscene wealth or his supercomputer of a brain or the many forms of martial arts he's become proficient in over his 80 years plus existence. It's actually none of those things. Not even the fact that he's basically comic book Sherlock Holmes, only with much better equipment. As the age-old saying goes, a hero is only good as his villain, and Batman has possibly the best rogue gallery in comic book history. You have your scheming penguins, your seductive poison ivies, your maniacal jokers and Harley Quinns floating about on the pages of the comic books and across our screens almost as much as the Caped Crusader himself these days. But the beauty of Batman villains is that even if they are obscure as being a literal one-off, they will still be the worst breed of criminal you can imagine existing. Killer Croc, one of the strongest Batman villains ever created, was discriminated against because of the fact that the Hush virus had forced him to resort to cannibalism. But while Croc's taste for human flesh was born out of a necessity, the Abattoir was born out of insanity. And, as always, an eternal dream quest for immortality. Created by Marv Wolfman and Jim Aparo in 1991, The Abattoir debuted in Detective Comics issue number 625 and has become one of the most obscure and underrated Batman villains of all time. In this video, we're going to take a look at everything that explains just why Arnold Etkar's criminal name is French for a slaughterhouse. This is Abattoir's origins explored. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. Who is Arnold Etkar? Abattoir's backstory. You know, a character is going to be absolutely off his rocker when the first few panels of his debut appearance show him breaking out of Arkham Asylum. Arnold Etkar is introduced to us in a hallway of Arkham Asylum with a gist of the reason for his incarceration there. He called himself the Abattoir and was locked up in Gotham's madhouse for murdering and feasting on the flesh of 19 individuals. That itself should give you an idea of just how off the rocker this guy is. And if his family history is to be believed, madness and a penchant for criminal activity seem to run in his blood. Many years ago, Arnold had an uncle who was a prominent politician in Gotham. Given the heritage of the city's complicated relationship with corruption, it should come as no surprise that Arnold's uncle had a few skeletons in his closet, the biggest one being his own brother, Arnold's father. Turns out, crime and politics did not go hand in hand in their household, and Arnold's family was a cast-out, left to fend for themselves like a common thief their father was. To avoid having his reputation ruined on account of his family dirty secret, Arnold's uncle forced his family to change their surname to Etkar, and knowing what we know today, we seriously cannot blame him for being as paranoid as he was. From a very young age, Arnold exhibited traits that suggested that he was nothing like his father. In fact, he was something even worse. Arnold Etkar, since his earliest days, felt that his family was cursed by evil, and his mission in life was to stop their tirade against the world by putting an end to their lives. He could have been called a poetic savior of the masses if this thought process ended there. Instead, it veered off into the furthest depths of depravity and madness. In addition to being extremely open to kinslaying just as a concept, it seemed like Arnold's mind harbored more: occult inclinations. He didn't just want to kill his relatives, he wanted to eat their flesh, suck the marrow out of their bones, and drink their blood to add their life force to his in order to become immortal. It was in pursuit of this ultimate goal that Arnold committed his first 19 murders and why he escaped Arkham in Detective Comics issue number 625. After making away in an Eagle Supply Company van, Arnold crashes an election rally being held by mayoral candidate Henry Etchison. Etkar shoots Etchison's wife dead in cold blood and declares his support for incumbent Deputy Mayor Harriman and his crime-riddled reign as a city administrator. Etkar starts shooting up the party in an attempt to get Etchison himself, but is distracted by Gotham City journalist Vicky Vale. Her constant photography set off his belief system, as he thought that his soul would be tarnished if it got captured by the camera. He pursued Vale in an attempt to reclaim his soul and add hers to his exhaustive list of personal sacrifices. Batman arrived in the nick of time and blunted Etkar's gunshot with his chest plate, though it did dispel his aura of being the demon of Gotham a little bit. After rescuing Vale and returning to the Batcave, Bruce Wayne decides to live up to his moniker. The world's greatest detective breaks into the place where it all began to commence his investigation. Locating Etkar's case file, he notices a peculiar change in his personal history that he forwards to Commissioner Gordon and then proceeds to interrogate one of the people who helped Arnold escape Arkham. After prodding around for a little bit, he discovered Etkar's location and visited him at the cemetery he was hiding out at. Batman confronted the Abattoir of Gotham City and was momentarily stunned by his freakish strength. He was able to break out of his grip and subdue him enough when he revealed to Arnold Etkar that he knew his family's secret. After throwing him back in Arkham, Batman goes to confront the person actually responsible for getting a butcher-like Abattoir back on the streets, Harry Etchison himself. Turns out, Arnold Etkar's true birth name is Arnold Etchison. He was kept locked away in an obscurity due to the obvious political threat he posed to the Etchison dynasty. Henry only let him out so he could arrange for his wife's death and strengthen his harsh anti-crime election campaign with a public display for the reason behind his proposed hard measures. Thanks to his incredibly deductive mind, Batman was able to identify Etchison's plot before it reached its final stages. But this wouldn't be the last time he'd hear from the Abattoir. Abattoir various story arcs. In issue number 628, Arnold Etchison makes his return in a rather bizarre fashion. While Oswald Cobblepot spends his time locked behind bars in Arkham, his prized ornithological collection comes under threat from the Abattoir as part of an unholy ritual that will grant him the immortality he has always craved. Following in the footsteps of the 17th century mystic king of Aurin, 3-Dama, Arnold planned to make 3 stages of sacrifice to achieve his goals. The first step involved cutting out the hearts of 2,000 doves, the symbol of peace. 1,300 of these were the penguins. The next step involved sacrificing 4,000 cows, the symbol of fertility and the continuance of life. Arnold accomplished this by killing everything living he could find at Gotham Milk Dairy. The last step was going to be the worst, by blowing up the Gotham Bridge. Arnold Etchison would finally complete his inhumane ritual and trade 6,000 human lives for everlasting immortality. Thankfully, the Caped Crusader was on hand to foil his plot and save Gotham citizens from yet another maniacal serial killer. Abattoir's next escape would come during the events of Nightfall, when Bane set every criminal in Gotham City free. Arnold went straight back to his family vendetta and killed several of his relatives in a vicious spree that saw him skin his victims alive. He zoned in on his last living relative, Graham, and managed to abduct him from the Dr. Tompkins orphanage. Abattoir planned to complete his lifelong mission by sacrificing Graham and 12 other orphans to attain immortality. Azrael intervened and managed to save the children, but this internal conflict allowed Arnold to escape. He'd enlist the help of Preston Payne, aka Clayface 3, to complete his quest by kidnapping Payne's son. He trapped Graham in an unimaginably torturous apparatus and left him there. Azrael came up against Abattoir once again, and in a repeat of their last encounter, found himself conflicted over what he was going to do to him now that he had him cornered. As he struggled to come to a decision, Abattoir's hand slipped off the plank he was grabbing and he fell to his death, much to the shock of Robin. It was this act that finally got Jean-Paul Valley relieved of his duties as Gotham's defender, as Bruce Wayne donned the cowl once again. In one last-ditch effort to complete his perceived destiny, Abattoir's spirit tries to take out his last blood relation, a distant cousin, but it's stopped by the world's greatest detective and summarily sent back to hell. Batman encounters him on his trip to the Netherrealm with Etrigan the Demon during the events of Batman Demon. Abattoir made his 21st century return thanks to the Blackest Night prophecy, as his body was being transported from Gotham to the Justice League's fortified crypts in Washington, D.C. A Black Lantern ring found him and revived his corpse as a thrall of Necron. Abattoir immediately resumed his cannibalistic ways and managed to corner Commissioner Gordon and Barbara Gordon at the police station when Deadman intervened. Every Black Lantern Batman villain then began pursuing the Caped Crusader and Red Robin, cornering them in a cemetery before eventually being tricked into immobility by the world's greatest detective. In 2013, a new Abattoir emerged, though this one was created more out of circumstance than mental health issues. Jersey Pallet was the sole survivor of a plane crash in the Cascade Mountains, but it was always suspected that there were others. Rumors had always swirled around the nature of that crash, and the fact that Pallet had cannibalized his fellow travelers in order to survive himself. So when a killer emerged in Gotham City whose MO resembled Maori rituals, Batman knew where to check immediately. Though he was incapacitated and nearly castrated by the new Abattoir, Batman is one of the greatest fighters in the world. He is able to get out of his bonds and subdue his attacker, sending him packing on a one-way trip to Arkham Asylum, just like his predecessor. What makes Abattoir so dangerous? There is absolutely nothing about him that makes you look at Arnold Etchison and go, damn, I better stay away from this monster. He doesn't have super strength. He cannot fly. He isn't a metahuman with powers that can wow the audience at a circus or bring Darkseid to heel, whichever suits the situation best. He's just a human being. What makes him one of the most sadistic to ever go up against Batman in his sheer insanity? It would not be an exaggeration to say that Abattoir would give Joker a run for his money, what with all his occult notions of attaining immortality through cannibalism and parricide. Abattoir, like his namesake, is a walking slaughterhouse. He is in peak physical condition for a man in his 40s and fight like a man in his early 20s. His feral, bloodthirsty fighting style has stalemated both Bruce Wayne and Azrael in the past, two men who know far more about hand-to-hand combat than the untrained Arnold Etkar. His frenzied, borderline barbaric approach to battle also renders him practically painless when the adrenaline is flowing through him. For a short span of time, Abattoir can take hits like he's Mr. Fantastic in full elasticity mode. And while these things are already enough to make you look over your shoulder a million times whenever you're roaming the streets of Gotham, it's his mind that is the real danger. Being spiritual is one thing. Arnold Etkar actually believes in the age-old myth that links cannibalism to immortality and is pursuing both with a relentless passion. He would get a serious kick out of torturing his victims first, or terrifying them at the very least. An example of this would be his treatment of Graham Etkar, who Abattoir strapped to a bed of spikes. With every passing hour, a weight would drop vertically above his chest, ensuring his death would be slow and painful. Arnold has already shown that he doesn't care much about his own blood, as he views human souls as a vehicle to unlocking a higher plane of existence. He believes by killing a human, he would possess their soul and gain their strength, something cultures forgotten long ago also put their faith in. Oddly enough, Abattoir actually required these abilities twice after his death. The first as a reanimated ghost trying to consume his last living cousin's unborn child's soul, and the second during the Blackest Night storyline when his corpse was reanimated as a Black Lantern. Even in death, Arnold Etkar made sure that his slaughterhouse was stocked to the ceiling with fresh corpses. And with the number of times he's broken out of Arkham, it's surprising he isn't called Mr. Miracle. Why the Abattoir deserves more recognition. While Batman has dealt with a plethora of demented villains in his 80-year-long career as a crime fighter, we haven't seen him go up against someone so clearly irredeemable. The Abattoir isn't one of those layered characters whose motivation can be justified through poetic license or even logical deduction. He's just a pure psychopath, plain and simple. And that is what makes him so effective. Arnold Etkar is one of the only human adversaries of Batman to have a ledger so red it would make Red Guardian blush, and then gape his mouth in horror when he realizes about 50% of it are just his family members. The Abattoir is a character that has been used sparingly since he was first created in 1991, and that's completely fine with us. Because unlike Calendar Man or Ragdoll, Abattoir is one D-list Batman villain who can actually use some mystique in his backstory. The fact that all we know about Arnold is what we're told is kind of jarring in a world that is capitalizing on flashbacks and redemption stories than Popeyes did with their chicken sandwich. We love to see him pop up in some form on mainstream media soon, as part of an animated show, an Arkhamverse installment, or a cameo in that new Arkham Asylum TV show DC is developing. He's menacing, he's charismatic, and most of all, he's bat crap crazy. Tell us that a cold open that features a known cannibal breaking out of what's supposed to be the most secure facility in Gotham City doesn't sound like an immediate Emmy nod from Matt Reeves' team to you. We thought so as well. So what did you think? If you like this video, don't forget to like it, comment, and subscribe. Until next time, take care, and thanks everyone.